The argument started the same way most of them had lately, over something small and seemingly insignificant. I had simply asked if she wanted to spend time together that evening, believing I was being considerate by setting aside work and distractions for us. I expected appreciation, or at the very least, a casual response. Instead, her words cut through me like ice. "I don't owe you intimacy," she said flatly, her arms crossed and her gaze unwavering, as if daring me to challenge her. At first, I thought I misheard her. The words sounded so foreign coming from her mouth that my brain struggled to process them. I let out a half-laugh, half-nervous chuckle. "What?" I asked, trying to make sense of what she meant. She didn't hesitate. "It means exactly what it sounds like," she snapped. "I'm tired of you acting like it's some kind of obligation. Just because we're married doesn't mean I owe you anything." It felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath me. For 8 years, we had built a life together. Sacrifices, compromises, and late nights working toward our future. And yet, here she was, telling me in no uncertain terms that my needs and feelings were irrelevant, that the very foundation of our marriage, trust, partnership, intimacy, was not a given, but something I had foolishly assumed was mutual. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her how much it hurt to hear that, how rejected I felt, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her, realizing that in that moment, she felt more like a stranger than the woman I had married. The fight didn't last much longer. She walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my mind racing. I tried to convince myself that she was just stressed, that she didn't really mean it, but deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the first time she had made me feel like I didn't matter. It was just the first time she had said it so clearly. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, dissecting every word, trying to pinpoint the moment things had gone wrong. Had I missed the signs? Had I done something to push her away? Or had I been fooling myself all along, believing we were still a team? By morning, my frustration had solidified into something else, clarity. If she didn't owe me intimacy, then maybe I didn't owe her the endless sacrifices I had been making to keep our marriage afloat. I wasn't going to allow myself to feel like a beggar in my own relationship anymore. I didn't say anything to her right away. Instead, I started paying attention, really paying attention, to how we interacted, to how she treated me, and to how little she seemed to care about the effort I put into our life together. The more I noticed, the more convinced I became that something had to change. I wasn't sure what that change would look like yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her words define my worth. In the days following that conversation, something inside me shifted. I started seeing our marriage differently, not as a partnership, but as a constant balancing act where I was always the one giving more to keep things steady. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I remembered the long nights I had spent working overtime, so we could afford the down payment on our house. Back then, she had told me how proud she was, how lucky she felt to have someone who cared so much about our future. I had held on to those words like fuel, pushing myself harder because I believed I was doing it for us. But looking back, it felt like my sacrifices had been quietly erased the moment they stopped being convenient for her. It wasn't just the money. It was the little things, too. The nights I canceled plans with friends because she said she needed me at home. The weekends I spent fixing things around the house or running errands to make her life easier. Even the times I stayed up late to listen to her vent about work, because I didn't want her to feel alone. To me, intimacy wasn't just about sex. It was about feeling valued, feeling connected, knowing that the effort I put in wasn't taken for granted. But apparently, that was too much to ask. I started keeping track of the imbalance, not on paper, but in my head. Every time she dismissed me, brushed off something I cared about, or treated me like an afterthought, I took note. Like the night I came home excited about a new project at work, and she barely looked up from her phone. Or the time I made her favorite dinner after a stressful week, and all she said was a half-hearted thanks before walking away. I don't think she even noticed the way I was withdrawing. Maybe that was the worst part. How easy it was for her to overlook me when I stopped trying so hard. One night, I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the dark windows, wondering if it was even worth going inside. It was a stupid thought. It was my home, too. But I felt like a guest there, like someone whose presence barely registered. I thought about what she had said. I don't owe you intimacy. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question I've been avoiding. What did she owe me? Respect? Appreciation? Partnership? Or had I just imagined that those things were supposed to be part of a marriage? I thought about the early days, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other, when we talked for hours, when I felt like she actually saw me. I miss that version of us. But the more I tried to picture it, the more it felt like a different lifetime. That night, I didn't go inside right away. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the rear-view mirror, trying to recognize a man looking back. I didn't see the guy who had once been full of dreams and plans. I saw someone tired. Someone who had spent years pouring into a relationship that had stopped giving anything back. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't angry because of what she said. I was angry because deep down, I knew she was right. She didn't owe me intimacy. But if that was true, then I didn't owe her the version of myself that had been bending over backward to keep us together. From that moment, I stopped trying. At first, she didn't seem to notice. She was so used to me filling the silence, making the plans, keeping things together, that my withdrawal just blended into the background. But as the days passed, it started to sink in. She'd throw out little comments. "You been quiet lately, or everything okay?" But I would just shrug. I wasn't going to give her the chance to turn it back on me, to make me explain myself while she acted like nothing she had said had caused this. And then something strange happened. She started trying. At first, it was subtle, bringing me coffee when I was working late, suggesting we watch a movie together. But instead of jumping at these small scraps of attention, I let her efforts hang in the air unacknowledged, not out of spite, but because I needed to know if it was real, or if it was just another way to smooth things over without actually addressing the problem. The tension in the house grew thicker. She started poking at me more, criticizing me over small things, getting irritated over nothing. She was frustrated because, for the first time, I wasn't the one fixing things. And then one night, she finally asked, "Are you mad at me?" Her voice was quieter than usual, almost uncertain. I looked at her and said the one thing I had been holding back since that night. "I'm just done trying harder than you." I saw the words hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but for once, nothing came out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. Not because I had won an argument, but because I had finally stopped apologizing for wanting more than she was willing to give. I woke up that morning and went about my usual routine as if nothing had changed. I made coffee, checked my emails, and left for work without so much as a glance in her direction. It wasn't avoidance. It was acceptance. Something between us had shifted, and I was done pretending otherwise. By noon, the messages started. Asterisk, we need to talk. Asterisk, I ignored it. Asterisk, seriously, we can't just act like this isn't happening. Asterisk, I left that one unread. When I got home that evening, she was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. Her body was tense, her expression carefully composed, but I could see the cracks. She had rehearsed this conversation, planned out her words, but I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. Asterisk, what do you want? Asterisk, I asked, tossing my keys onto the counter. Her eyes narrowed, disbelief flashing across her face. Asterisk, what do I want? Are you kidding me? You're the one acting like a stranger in our own house. I want to know what's going on with you. Asterisk, I let out a short, humorless laugh. Not because any of this was funny, but because it was absurd. Asterisk, what's going on with me? You're serious? I'm just following your lead, sweetheart. The night you told me you didn't owe me intimacy, you made it very clear what this marriage is and what it isn't. Asterisk, her face flushed red, and for a brief moment, I thought she would deny saying it. Instead, she went on the defensive. Asterisk, and I don't. I'm allowed to set boundaries. If you can't handle that, maybe that's your problem, not mine. Asterisk, anger surged in my chest, but I swallowed it. I refused to let this spiral into another fight where nothing got resolved. You're right, I said, keeping my voice calm. Asterisk, you don't owe me intimacy. But let me ask you this. Do I owe you commitment? Do I owe you loyalty? Do I owe you anything beyond basic civility? Asterisk, her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, I saw something other than frustration in her expression. Fear. She didn't answer, so I continued. Asterisk, because if we're playing by those rules, then maybe I don't owe you date nights. Maybe I don't owe you emotional support. Maybe I don't even owe you coming home at the end of the day. Maybe I don't owe you putting us first when you've already made it clear that we're not a priority to you. Asterisk, that's when she snapped. Asterisk, that's not fair. You're twisting this into something it's not. I just wanted space. I never said I didn't care about you. Asterisk, asterisk, then show it. Asterisk, the words came out sharper than I intended, but I meant them. Asterisk, because right now, all I see is someone who wants the benefits of marriage without putting in the work. Asterisk, the room went silent. She looked like she wanted to argue, to tell me I was wrong, but the words never came. Instead, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't know how we got here, she whispered. And the truth was, neither did I. The woman sitting across from me didn't feel like the same person I had married. Maybe I wasn't the same man anymore either. But instead of sitting beside her, like I once would have, I turned and walked away. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to be the one to fix this. I didn't go back into the living room that night. I let her sit there, alone with her thoughts, while I locked myself in the guest room. It wasn't a grand statement or an attempt to make her chase me. It was just me drawing a line. I needed distance, even if it was just a wall between us. The next few days were quiet. We moved through the house like strangers, avoiding eye contact, exchanging nothing more than short, necessary words. She tried to restart the conversation a few times, but I shut it down. I wasn't ready. Instead, I spent that time figuring out what I wanted. Could I keep living like this? Trapped in a marriage that felt more like a contract than a relationship? Did the years I had poured into us still mean anything? But most of all, I thought about myself, about who I had become and who I wanted to be. It didn't take long to realize that I didn't like the person this marriage had turned me into. I was exhausted, tired of giving more than I got, tired of chasing affection that should have been given freely, tired of feeling like I was the only one fighting for something that was already broken. So, one evening I made my decision. I walked into the living room, where she sat scrolling through her phone. She wasn't looking at me, but I knew she was waiting, shoulders tense, bracing herself for whatever I was about to say. Asterisk, I can't do this anymore. Asterisk, her head snapped up, eyes wide. Asterisk, what? Asterisk, this, I said, motioning between us. Asterisk, I can't keep pretending we're fine when we're not. I can't keep giving and giving while you act like just being here is enough. Asterisk, she started to speak, but I cut her off. Asterisk, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even hurt. I'm just done. I don't know if that means we separate, if it means counseling or something else entirely. But I do know I can't keep living like this. Asterisk, for the first time in weeks, she looked scared. Asterisk, so you're leaving? Asterisk, I shrugged. Asterisk, maybe, maybe not. But we need time apart to figure that out. Asterisk, her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I almost caved, almost wrapped my arms around her, and promised we'd fix this like we always did. But then I remembered her words, that she didn't owe me intimacy, and I realized that I didn't owe her this fight. This isn't just about you, I said. Asterisk, you made it clear what you don't owe me. Now, I'm making it clear what I won't keep giving without anything in return. Asterisk, I picked up the bag I had already packed and walked toward the door. She didn't stop me. She just sat there, crying quietly, as I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not because it was over, but because, for the first time, I had a choice. I didn't check my phone that night. I knew she would call or text eventually, but I wasn't ready to hear whatever she had to say. I needed space. I needed to breathe. The first few days alone felt strange. I ate dinner in silence, went to bed without the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. At first, it was freeing. Then, the loneliness crept in. Not because I missed her, but because I missed what we used to be. She called on the third night. Asterisk, hey. Asterisk, her voice was small, hesitant. Asterisk, hey. Asterisk, silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. She had been crying. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down, just because she sounded vulnerable. I don't know what to do, she finally admitted. Her words hit harder than I expected. She had always seemed so sure of herself, so unwilling to admit fault. Hearing her say she didn't have the answers threw me off balance. I don't either, I admitted. Asterisk, but I know I can't keep living like we were. Asterisk, asterisk, neither can I. Asterisk, it was the first thing we had agreed on in months. But was it too late? I didn't rush back. I set boundaries. If we were going to try again, things had to change. She had to prove she was willing to fight for this too. For a while, she did. Counseling, apologies, efforts I had longed for. But deep down, I couldn't forget how we got here. In the end, there was no explosive argument or tearful goodbye. Just quiet understanding. I filed for separation a month later. She didn't fight it. Walking away hurt. But for the first time in years, I had chosen myself. Whether it was the right choice, only time would tell. But I knew one thing for sure. I didn't owe anyone more than they were willing to give in return. Not anymore.